This summer, members of the Green Party of England and Wales will be electing a new executive, commonly known as GPEx. Now, GPEx members take on a number of different portfolios, and today I am delighted to be joined by one of the candidates for the management coordinator position. But before I introduce them, I want you to scroll down right now and hit that subscribe button. It means that you won't miss out on any of the interviews that Bright Green is putting out in the coming weeks and months, and you won't miss all of the interviews with the candidates for this year's GPEx election. So with that out of the way, without further ado, I'm absolutely delighted today to be joined by Kefentse Dennis. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm enjoying the weather. Looking forward to Monday and Tuesday.
Good. You are unlike me because I am hating the weather, but getting through it. So I'll start you off with hopefully a straightforward question, which is just why do you think you'll make a good management coordinator on GPEx?
Because of my level-headedness, I believe that due to the kind of factions the two biggest factions that are formed within the party, I've always been trying to be in the middle of that. There's times, and if you follow me on social media, you'll see times when I've given it to both sides when I felt that either of them were in the wrong. I've always tried to be balanced and make sure that, you know, whatever the situation is, I take it case by case. And if it's someone even that I am close to or someone that I work with, I will tell them when they're wrong. Obviously, I'll do it in a sensible and professional way, but I feel like that is needed when it comes to, you know, safeguarding, when it comes to dealing with staff, when it comes to dealing with, you know, sensitive or precious or, you know, maybe even information that might make you emotional. So I think it's important that, you know, to have a clear head and to be as professional as possible.
So one of the key components of the management coordinator role you've kind of alluded to there, it has a kind of central relationship to the Green Party staff team. So how do you think that the management coordinator and GPEx as a whole could be better supporting the party staff in order to deliver on its political ambitions?
Well, I think we need to be honest with our ambitions and the reality of what that is. We've got a goal obviously set in our political strategy, but I feel like the reality is it's impossible to reach that goal at the moment with the way things are, with the current budget that we have. So we have to make staff aware of these facts, and that might mean renegotiating some things, as in what we do in terms of financing or in terms of development, or even in terms of our own you know, political strategy, because it's no good telling a staff member, I want you to do X, Y, Z, and then turn around and go, well, I'm sorry, but I can only do X. I mean, with the resources you're giving me, with the time that's been allocated to me, I can only do X. How can you then expect me to do X, Y, Z? And a lot of staff have left as a result of not being able to do that, because they've come into the situation thinking that they'll be able to do all these things, and they're not being given the reality of it. And I feel like there's people in the party that wants to be, they're really ideological and they're really, you know, looking for the best in things. But sometimes you need to be pragmatic. Sometimes you need to be like, look, we need to be grounded to the floor and tell it as it is. And if that means some things need to change, so be it. And if that means having difficult conversations with people, including staff members, including other member of GPEx or for whatever committee, so be it.
So you talked about being pragmatic there and scaling back certain things. I wondered if you could elaborate on that a little bit. I guess, are you suggesting that, you know, given the current sort of level of resource and the capacity in the staff team at the moment, that actually the Green Party's political ambitions are too ambitious to deliver at the moment?
Yes, and I would say we've got two choices at the moment. Either we drastically, and I mean drastically, increase our funding, and that means having a strategy where we get a large amount of money coming in, whether it be via, you know, green organizations, green donors, or what have you, or we have to reduce our political ambitions to the resources that we have. Now, I'm personally in favor of the former and not the latter, but we can't, we're burning the candle at both ends. And I'd hate to see that people think back to, you know, the win back in 2010 we had with Caroline Lucas and in Brighton Pavilion. We want to, you know, we want to repeat that again and again and again, but we're not doing that, in my personal opinion. I feel like we're stretching ourselves too much with too little resource in order to do what we did in 2010. And bear in mind, we had less members then. We had less members. We had technically less supporters, but we were very, very targeted what we were doing. We had a way of doing things. We knew people knew what their position was, and we did it. And I feel like with this, since 2015, we've kind of coasted a little bit. It's kind of been a bit lackluster, and only now we're really getting back into trying to be a political party again. So I feel like, you know, one of those two things have to happen. We can't keep being in the middle.
And so I guess obviously sort of fundraising and that element of the party's work doesn't sort of fall within the role of management coordinator, but nevertheless, as if you were elected, you'd be a member of GPEx, which does kind of have oversight and overall kind of oversight of fundraising and a whole bunch of financial decisions. And you'd also be on AFCOM, which I can't remember what it stands for. I think it's Administration and Finance Committee. Correct me if I'm wrong. But that's a subcommittee of GPEx, which makes a whole bunch of financial decisions within the party. So how, you made the case there that you think that the party really needs to, you know, massively ramp up the amount of funding it's able to pull in, and to then be able to stick that into staff capacity and resource. So what does a kind of fundraising strategy that delivers that look like?
Again, I would say it means talking to green businesses. Now, I know people don't like the idea of green business itself, but due to the kind of climate that we're in, and due to the economic system that we have to work in until we're in government, and then we can take that apart, it means we have to work with what is at play. And at play at the moment is going to green businesses, going to green organizations, maybe going to green unions and saying, hey, if you work with us, we will bring that change that we all want, which is a green future. And, you know, I think that's not a bad thing. I think it's okay to ask for donations. I think it's okay for us to affiliate ourselves with green businesses, as long as there's obviously a very good vetting process of what they do with their finances that fit with our ethos and fit with our ethics. But I think that's a major thing we need to start looking at, because if you want to be a credible party, that's what we need to do. That's what other parties do. No, they might have obviously differing ideologies to us, obviously, because we're the Green Party, but that's what they do in order to get the funds that they have. So we need to do the same thing, just obviously our own version of it, which would be green.
So moving back again to kind of the staff element of the role. So the management coordinator has kind of oversight and overall kind of political responsibility and accountability for the party's HR processes. So how would you improve the party's HR?
Again, it's about talking to the staff and talking to, actually not even just staff, talking to volunteers as well, and making sure we understand what our roles are and what the relationship is between each other. Because I feel like some people feel like it's appropriate to do things that are inappropriate. The way they talk to staff is inappropriate when they shouldn't do that. And I think it's not out of maliciousness or anything like that, or nefariousness. I just think they don't realize that when you join GPEx, or when you're in these kind of committees where you have staff with you, you have to conduct yourself in a certain way. And I don't think people just realize that that means you can't talk to staff members this way. It means you have to have this kind of communication versus what you have with another kind of communication. And also, I think staff need to be honest with how they feel. I've read a report recently about how they feel overworked and very, very stressed with their job. And again, I think that feeds into the resource issue, but maybe it feeds into the relationship also with with volunteers. Maybe that needs to be addressed and looked at. For me, it's about making sure that these staff members are supported as much as possible, because they're the lifeblood. Because at the end of the day, we're, as volunteers, we sit around, we do committees, we come up with these ideas, but we're not doing the running around and getting it done. For the most part, it's staff members doing that. So they do the important lifting so we can benefit from the overall goal of, reaching a green future. So it's important that, they're regularly checked in upon. It's important that we check their levels of efficiency, their mental health, and making sure that they're okay to be working with us. Because there is a problem with staff retention, and there is a problem with turnover with staff as well. I feel like it's a revolving door from time to time with certain positions, and that needs to be addressed.
So one of the other aspects of the role is sort of overseeing the party's approach to safeguarding. So what's your background and experience in relation to that?
I've worked in schools, so when you work in the school like I've worked both in primary, secondary, SEM, SEN, so special needs, primary, secondary, and colleges. So you have to go through the processes of making sure that the safeguarding rules, have to know what happens when there is a breach of safeguarding, who to talk to, what the correct procedures are. And I feel like with this party, I'm not saying that there's safeguarding breaches happening left and right. I just think it's important to emphasize we have a whole wide community. That means that there's potential vulnerable people within it. So we've got green seniors, we've got under 18 greens, we've got women, we've got those in the LGBTQ, we've got disabled. All of those are part of potential people at risk. So we have to make sure that we're doing due diligence and making sure that when someone does raise a safeguarding issue, it's dealt with properly. Because again, I've heard in the past of people raising things that have not been dealt with properly. And that's an issue if you're having a serious breach of safeguarding and it's not dealt with in the proper manner by people we trust in positions of power.
So before I move on to some questions that are slightly more general about GPEx as a whole, because obviously if you were elected, you'd be elected not just to the portfolio, but you'd be elected to GPEx, and you'd have to kind of collect responsibility of that. So I want to pick up some of those sort of general questions too. Before I do that, just I guess interesting point is that you for the last 2 years have been serving as the party's trade union liaison officer.
Mm-hmm.
And you, I guess, have chosen not to stand for re-election for that role, but instead pitch for the management coordinator post. So I was just wondering whether you could kind of talk through your thought process on that and what kind of made you make that decision.
When I joined the trade union liaison group, I met an amazing bunch of people in the committee, but there was one particular person that had the passion, and I mean, they ate, drank, and slept about and dreamt about trade union more so than I ever could. And the more and more the role continued, the more in the back of my mind I was going, you know what, this person would make a perfect replacement for me, because I feel like this person has so many ideas, they know what they're talking about, they're proper invested their whole life, even more so than me, to this role. So I had a conversation with this person saying, I'm going to leave this role, and I want you to take it on, because I feel like you're the best person for it. And as I've said, as I've worked in schools training to be a teacher, I've gotten more and more into safeguarding, more and more talking to staff members about HR and how that works, and also as well. So it's just I wouldn't say like my passion for trade unionism has decreased. It's just I've increased my interest in safeguarding in HR, and I know that it'll be in the safe hands of whoever wins the next election for that particular post.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to those kind of slightly more general questions about GPEx. So for viewers watching, if you're not aware, GPEx is the body within the party that is responsible for the party's finances. It also has responsibility for kind of the day-to-day management and organisation of the party, and its reputation and so on. So what I wanted to put to you today is, what do you think the biggest challenges facing the Green Party right now?
There's two things that I can't shake, and I think the first thing is, because I'm going to cheat a little bit and say two things, but I think they're equal in capacity. is first is finances. I am really, really worried that I don't think we're able to carry out what we want to do whenever the next general election is, with our target candidates that we have, and with the prime target candidate that we have, with the current resources and the current way we do things at the moment. Now, the strategy itself is fine, but I just feel like if we had a lot more money coming in, we could do a lot more with it. So that's the first thing, because again, I was reading reports about how if we want, what a typical cost of a to stand in a constituency and to have a target candidate in a constituency. If we use that figure and applied it to all our target candidates, half the budget, well, actually more than half the budget that we get a year will go straight onto that. And that's before we talk about staff, that's before we talk about conference, that's before we talk about anything else. That is more than 50% that goes straight onto implementing this political strategy. So it's very, very important that we sort that out. So like I said, either increase the budget or reduce our political strategy. But I'm obviously more in favor of increasing the budget. And the second thing is obviously this issue with the gender critical people and the trans rights people as well. This has been going on for years and years and years and years and years. And obviously I've put my tuppence into the conversation as well. I've got, and interestingly, I've got, both thanks and people who were annoyed with what I was trying to say, trying to find a balance. And for me, I speak to so many people in the party who are on both sides. And, it's more of a spectrum than, ironically, a binary choice of you're either this or you're either that. Because I feel like there's plenty of people that are okay with trans people. We say trans rights are human rights. I think most people in the party believe that. I think there's extreme people on the GC side that don't believe that. And regardless, you can't change sex no matter what. And I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the people that are more into the center of this, who say, you know what, I do believe that they're fine. They can do what they want. I have no problem with trans people. What I'm worried about personally is women's spaces or women in sport or this or single sex spaces and such. And I think just shouting rhetoric of, trans rights, trans rights are human rights, or, adult human female, that doesn't help. That doesn't help the situation. People are using the complaints process and weaponizing it in order to get people suspended, because we have a no sort of suspension sort of thing. So simple disagreements can turn into suspensions, people bullying each other, people doing all these kind of tactical, nefarious things just because we have a disagreement. So I think it's important that we have mediation. I think mediation is the key to this, because like I said, I think there's a lot of people who are more in common than are divided when it comes to this issue. And that's on both sides, because I've spoken to trans people, I've spoken to women who identify as women from birth on this, about they agree with a lot of things. It's just there's one or two things they're not either unsure about, or they're perceived that there's an issue with, or there might be an issue. But it's difficult when sometimes when two people can't even sit down in the same room and talk to each other about this. Now, I don't care if they're in the same room and facing away from each other. I want a conversation. I want someone to start the conversation so we can remedy this. Because again, for those on the, the RTA side, just saying, trans rights, human rights does not negate what they're saying. They're going to still feel the same way, regardless of what you're saying. So we need to have a conversation. And same for the other side. You just shouting adult human female, it's not going to change what they think. So we need to come together and actually have a proper conversation. And I don't mean have a conversation about the existence of trans people, because obviously they do exist. But I want to have a conversation about fears, what people perceive, what it means to them in their life. Why do they feel the way that they do? And I think if we start having that conversation, because I believe we're more on a spectrum than it is a binary choice of you're either this or that, then I think we'll get somewhere. And for me, that's the second, the two biggest things. It's the obviously the factions that we have between gender critical and the trans rights people, and the finances.
So your second point there kind of is leading me on to the next question that I wanted to put to you, which is, I guess, about kind of discrimination and diversity issues within the party. And I'm going to come on to that, but I guess I wanted to unpick a little bit of that stuff you talked about on, I guess, trans rights, because it's a part of that diversity and discrimination question that I wanted to pick up. And given you've kind of flagged it, I want to maybe spend a little bit of time picking it. And so I think it's interesting what I think you said, because there will be some people who will be listening to that who will, in fact, I would say, I would guess there'll be most people in the party listening to that who have been sort of had proximity to the kind of toxicity of the conversation that's been going on in the party.
Yeah.
And a lot of them will be thinking, there's elements of that I very much agree with. There's elements that I very much disagree with. And there'll be some people watching this who won't have been proximate to this conversation at all within the party, but over the last few years have become very, very accustomed to it, because the right-wing press are almost daily now attacking trans people and trans rights. You've got the Tory leadership contest going on at the moment, where there was only one candidate who didn't make opposing trans rights a kind of a dog whistle or a kind of stake in the ground in their election pitch.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess my question to you really is, there's a couple of things in there that you said which I think, to devil's advocate a bit, you kind of framed some of this conversation as being about a disagreement.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you are a trans or non-binary member of the party,
Yeah.
I think for a lot of them that they find it very difficult to see it as simply a disagreement, because what you've characterized there, I think, is the kind of extreme wing of the so-called gender criticals,
Mm-hmm.
very much do want to take away the rights of trans people, not just in the party but in the country as a whole. And so when they're faced with that situation where they've got people who are essentially making that case within their own party, who are bringing motions to conference to to repeal our policy on trans rights, who are engaging in the wider kind of movement to counter trans rights in the country. I think a lot of people would find it very difficult to think that the answer to this necessarily is that we all sit around in a room together and work things out, when it's their fundamental rights that are kind of under threat. And so I guess I wanted to invite you to elaborate a little bit on that, because I think from what I heard you saying, there was more nuance in it than that, in that you were kind of making a big distinction between people who are on a learning process,
yep,
and those who have been radicalized. And I wondered if you could touch on that.
Yeah, of course. And I reiterate again, I'm not talking about the far, those on both ends. I'm talking about the people who are like more here in the middle, because I've spoken to many people who would be viewed as transphobic or gender critical, and I've had conversations with them, and they said to me, look, I have no problem with them, I'm just having a fear of this. So we have to then distinguish what is that fear, but also distinguish between, they're not saying your existence or your right shouldn't be taken away. Like, they're happy for you to exist. They're happy for you to have your rights. They just feel that, other rights are being, eroded as a result of that. Whether that's true or whether that's perceived, that's how they feel. And I want to have a conversation about that and why they feel that way. Is there evidence for that? And have a proper, logical, reasoned, discussion about it. And again, I had a colleague who on GPEx who brought about a report, who did it was a survey of British people that and their views on transgender people. And there were things that you would expect from it. So for the most part, most of Britain from that report said that they were okay with transgender people. They're happy for them to exist. They're happy for them to have their rights. But obviously, like in any sort of survey, you have people on who were completely against it, and there was a significant percentage of that needs to obviously be addressed. But what I want to see from the party is those who who would be viewed as gender critical, but agree with, I think trans rights have a right to exist, and actually support trans rights people, then I think they need to have a conversation with other people within the gender critical community and say, look, you're being too extreme, and we need to get past this in order for all of us to move in one step and be uniform with this. So, I don't know if that means a disassociation, or they have their own conversation about this and come up with their own plan of how to sort that out. But that needs to happen. And I think that is happening a little bit, because from what I've seen is, you got the Green Party women's group. You had some people that have resigned as a result of that. And ironically, as a result of that, the committee started working again. It started functioning. Emails have started being given out and such. But what I would say to that is, if you then feel like, that's been completely overrun by gender critical women, but you got these other group of women that are happy to include, proper trans rights, and I want to do this and talk about trans rights all day long, that's fine. Form your own women's group then. I see no issue with having one, Green Party women, another Green Party women, maybe with X in the, in the spelling of it or something. That way, there's two functioning committees that are bringing forth their ideas of how women are in society and how that impacts on them. That way, it's not one committee that are fighting against each other constantly, because we've had that for the last 3 years where it's been 50-50. So this way, at least you get two separate committees that are functioning, and then people can just pick whichever side they are. Now, if you're talking about the gender critical side, I would say then that it might be a case of, E&D or something, that the Equalities and Diversity Committee then saying, look, there's an issue obviously within the party about this. There's some people that have been described as extreme and radical. Can we have a conversation about this and why they feel like this? And can we come to an understanding? Can we find some commonalities, at least with the other group, so we can come together and move past this? That's all I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying, anything more than just, I want to have a conversation that includes trans rights, obviously is human rights, and they exist. I don't think, if you're saying that they don't, then I don't want to have a conversation with you. But I still think there's people who are gender critical who believe that, but they're just fearful of other things. Like I said, single sex spaces for sport, for, for domestic abuse, for other things of that nature. So that's all it is. I just want to have a more of a nuanced conversation about where the fears come from. Can we have a bit of an understanding, and can we find some commonalities? Because at the end of the day, we're all in the Green Party and we all want to reach the same goal.
We could talk about this for hours, but in the interest of time and moving on, I'm going to kind of pick up some of the other issues around discrimination and diversity within the party, which often I think actually get kind of masked and end up not getting the attention that they deserve, whilst there's this non-stop kind of conversation happening at a central level, at conference and in other spaces, with regards to people trying to overturn our existing trans rights policy and the kind of conversations that you've alluded to. But just to give some context, I mean, and some kind of starting points, we currently have a deputy leadership election going on concurrently with the GPEx elections, and all four of the candidates in that election are men from London. You look at the party from the kind of grassroots right to the top, and you can see that in terms of our elected officials, in terms of our target candidates, in terms of people who are often running regional and local party committees, right up to GPRC and other bodies at a kind of central level, the party is overwhelmingly white in terms of its membership and in terms of people who hold kind of power and influence within it. It's very much skewed towards white people, and I think there's if you look at some particular local parties have deep problems in the fact that they are overwhelmingly white in particularly racially diverse areas. You have issues around, for example, allegations of anti-Semitism within the party, issues around disability discrimination, access. There's a whole bunch of stuff, and I guess we've just seen the publication of the Diverse Matters report, which has a series of recommendations in it as to what the party should be doing going forward on issues of tackling discrimination and being a kind of liberatory party as well. And I guess as a member of GPEx, you would have some kind of key responsibility in order to start doing work to improve and drive and deliver this stuff. So how do you see yourself working on that going forward if you are elected to GPEx again?
I think the first thing in regards to racism, we need to talk about the fact that the party is institutionally racist. I've said this on many occasions. It's been said by both members of the E&D coordinators. They've said this years ago. The previous chair of Greens of Colour, which I am currently, left, and another member left due to institutional racism. And it's not funny, and it's a serious issue when we're talking about London Green Party, and I see photos and not one black or brown person in there. That is serious. I went to, okay, from time to time, GPEx has meetings in London. I went there a couple of months ago. Well, it's in June, so last month. And it's a lot more diverse than Birmingham that we're in at the moment. But Birmingham's still a diverse city, but it has nothing on London in terms of diversity. And it's mind-boggling how that is possible. Same with Lambeth, same with Tower Hamlets and Brixton. Why is it all white? I don't understand the issue of you literally have areas of black and brown people. So for me, it's not it's no longer an excuse of, well, people just don't go to those areas because of X, Y, Z. No, at this point, it's institutional racism. Why? Because you got when you talk about the Stephen McPherson definition of it, it includes, sorry, ignorance. Is it blissful? It's forgetfulness and blissful ignorance. And this party is doing that time and time and time again. And like I said, all you have to do is look at Manchester, look at Liverpool, look at Birmingham, look at London, look at Newcastle, look at Sheffield, look at Leeds, all these areas. And we barely got anyone. When I went to conference in Birmingham, I was one of the few black people there. Like, it was like me and another person. Actually, no, there was like 2 other people. And like, when it came to brown people, there was like a handful. That it's disgraceful. And people keep coming to me and saying, oh, what should we do? And I say to them, use the strategy in order to win, but do it in black and brown areas. They're not scary people. Like, I get it, your local party is white, that's fine. But go to those areas, make sure you're doing the actual work with them, with the communities. That's all it takes. But yet again and again and again, you don't see that. And I don't know when it becomes a point of where it becomes blissful and becomes willful. Now, I don't want the party to ever get to that point. But if we continue on, it's going to be a major issue. And I even spoke about it on Twitter today about the lack of diversity, even in our current and past elections on GPEx and either for the leadership or deputy leadership. I've checked the stats. People from non-white communities never reach more than 20% in terms of this year, 2019, 2020 or 2019. I think it's just outside of the deputy leadership. I think it's just me. Isn't it just me who's a non-white standing in GPEx? I think at the moment, but that in itself is an issue. So, that heavily needs to be addressed. And it's like I said, it's just a simple fix. Go to those areas. And that's what frustrates me the most, because it's not a complicated thing, because you can do it. Because I've seen it many times when you go to either the poor working white class areas, or you go to the middle class areas. You make gains and you make wins. And that's why we've got councillors. But you're not doing it in the other areas. And that's the issue. In terms of the discriminations, yeah. Unfortunately, when people don't experience, like with disability, if you're not personally experiencing it yourself, or you're talking to someone who has a disability, people don't think. So again, when we had the Birmingham conference, and I went to look around there to do an audit, because I've done a course on communications audits, where you look at a building and you look at the information it's giving you. Does it make sense to you as a person? Would it make sense to somebody else who's of a different characteristics to you? And I found it difficult to navigate it, because the toilets weren't clearly labeled, because they did a newfangled design for men and women, which I thought was very odd. When you went to the doors to go to the rooms, the numbers for the doors weren't on the door. They were in the glass next to, at the bottom in the corner, like to the left of the door. Who would look there to look for the number of the door? So then you have to go around and make sure you check all these things. Like I said, these are the simple little things. The disability group feels completely neglected when it comes to these issues. Conference should be going to them constantly saying, we need you to come over here and look at this building and make sure it's completely 100% accessible. And the same for the local parties. They should be going to the disability group, or going to those who are disabled in their communities, and go, how can we make this area a lot more accessible to you? But because either people don't know those people or don't bother to try, we have situations where people are in pubs upstairs and they're wondering why, oh, there's not a lot of people here. Well, maybe make it a bit more accessible, maybe not have it in a pub, have it in a neutral venue that is accessible for all people. So again, that's a bit of an issue. We need to have, clearly defined code of conduct for social media, so we know what bullying looks like, we know what harassment looks like, so that way we don't use the already weaponized complaints process to use it, because then you can clearly check, oh, this is bullying, but this is not, this is a simple disagreement, this is harassment because we can see it clearly defined here, so this person's going to be suspended. And you do things like that. I don't like the way that the complaints process is at the moment. I think it needs to be completely overhauled, because we should be having a triage style of service where it's tiered depending on what the complaint is. So if it's something severe, or it's someone of very good seniority, like I don't care if it's Caroline Lucas or someone who just joined the party yesterday, we need to have severity levels of what that complaint is, depending on what the thing is and who the person is, and get that done. But again, relates into resources, but also we need to make sure we're defining what those things are. So if we have clear definitions of what harassment, bullying, racism, and all these things look like, I think it will overall reduce the amount of complaints we get in, because then people know what is and what it isn't. And unfortunately, like I said before, people do weaponize complaints processes. So, it's a team effort from everyone on GPEx. That includes E&D, that includes Greens of Colour, that includes Jewish Greens, that includes Senior Greens and Disability and LGBTQ. It's all hands on deck, making sure that every liberation group and special interest group is consulted on what does this discrimination against your characteristic look like, and then putting that in making sure that is done in the actual writing and the terms and conditions. When you have your subcommittees, and making sure that they know what the definitions are, so that it can be, proper due diligence and proper disciplinary actions, if needed, is done, and it's done swiftly and effectively.
So I have a final kind of slightly flippant question for you, but just quickly at the beginning, I think you said that you were the only person of colour standing in this year's GPEx elections, and I think obviously the representation in the GPEx election is woeful, but I believe there is one other person of colour, which it's terrible that I'm saying the word one,
You are
which
right.
is Nanette
You are
Youssef,
right.
who is standing for internal comms. Yeah, and then also in terms of, I guess, other ethnic sort of non-white European groups, there's David Farby, who's Jewish as well. Yeah, so just to put that there, not to
So
I'm
happy to be correct. I'm happy to be corrected. That's fine.
Yeah, brilliant. So my final question for you is just who in the Green Party inspires you the most?
Well, I don't want to use the generic, I say generic, but most people say someone like Caroline Lucas or something. I mean, that's the reason I joined the party. But for me personally, right now, it's Zion Neal, who's the E&D, one half of the E&D coordinator. She, helps me so much in navigating through, disability. Like, she's helped me learn so much about disability, about how, even now when I go to a building, and I go, this building's not accessible because what Zai's telling me about, because she's so knowledgeable. And the conversations we have about the party, about when it comes to racism, the issues with, the trans rights issues and all these other manner of things. She's the reason I stay for a lot of the time, because, it gets hard at times and you feel like you're bashing your head against the wall. So, it's nice when we nearly have daily conversations about Green Party politics and such. And, she just helps me a lot. I feel like in some way she's a bit of like my, bit like my mentor. Like, it's kind of like mentor student sort of relationship where she helps me navigate a lot of what's happening within the party, because she's obviously been at this senior level before I was there. And she knows about disability, knows about racism. We talk about that as well. So I would say her.
And thank you so much. And I love that question at the end of these interviews, because every single person has given a different answer so far. And I'm sure there's many more to come. And I always find it a helpful way where, members can learn more about the inspiring work that other people within the party are doing. So that was my last question for you. Thank you so much for joining me. Where can people find out more about your campaign?
So I have two things. I have obviously my Twitter, which is just Kefentse Dennis. And obviously you'll see my name on this Zoom call anyway, so you just put the @ symbol before that. And also you've got the Facebook as well, which is Kefentse Dennis for management coordinator as well.
Well, thank you so much, Kefentse. And before I let everyone go, I just have a few final things to tell you before you stop watching. The first of them is that I said at the beginning, I'll say it again now, please do scroll down and hit that subscribe button. It means that you won't miss any of the other interviews that we're putting out with the other candidates for GPEx, including hopefully the other candidate for the management coordinator position. Still trying to pin that one down, but hopefully will be very, very soon. I'm sure there's plenty in here that you've agreed with, plenty that you have thoughts on, some that you might have disagreed with. Whatever you think, please do let us know in the comments down below and keep the conversation going there. The penultimate thing I have to tell you is that you may or may not be aware, but Bright Green doesn't have the backing of billionaires and big business. We rely solely on the kind and generous contributions of people like you. So if you are able to, please do head to bright-green.org/donate and set up a regular donation so that we can keep putting out videos like this, keep up with our articles, our online coverage of the Green Party, the Labour movement, and the wider left. And finally, you can find lots more kind of articles, news, comment, analysis of the GPEx elections and the deputy leadership election that's going on at the same time at our website, bright-green.org. So head over there to find out what's going on. So thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you very, very soon.